The air in Wintridge smelled like cinnamon, pine, and a little bit of snow. The lights hung on rooftops and lamp posts, shining like little stars all over the streets. It was the time for the Christmas festival, with carolers singing near the town square and kids laughing as they skated on the ice rink. Every shop window had beautiful decorations. The toy store had a mechanical Santa giving out presents, and the bakery across the street had a big pile of sugary pastries with a sign that said, "Warm your heart here." For most people in Wintridge, it felt like a living Christmas card. But for West Hartfield, it was just another place to keep away from making real connections. West's big house sat on a hill, looking down at the town. The lights were dim except for a small light in her office. Her office was cold and clean, with books on the shelves that she didn't read much anymore. West sat at her desk, looking at emails and typing answers without even thinking. There was a small glass of whiskey next to her, but she didn't drink it. Her assistant, Janine, stood in the doorway holding a big stack of letters tied up with a red ribbon. "Miss Hartfield," Janine said carefully, "these are the letters from the charity drive. We've already looked through most of them. Would you like to pick one to sponsor personally like last year?" West sighed and looked at the pile of letters. "Isn't the point of a donation to do this without me having to be involved?" she asked with a sharp voice. "Why pretend I'm really part of it?" "Well, it's become a tradition," Janine said with a small, strange smile. "People like to know the Hartfield Foundation is helping with Christmas miracles in this town." West waved her hand. "Leave them. I'll look at them later." Janine hesitated. "Maybe a little inspiration wouldn't hurt," she said softly before leaving the room. Hours passed, but West didn't look at the letters. Outside, the wind started to blow, rattling the windows. West glanced at the letters again and frowned. With a sigh, she untied the ribbon and picked up the first letter. It was written on lined paper with messy handwriting, but it was filled with honesty. "Dear Santa, I know this is a silly letter, but my sister Lily and I think maybe you'll read it because we don't have anyone else to ask. I'm Jasper and I'm 10. My sister is 6. We live in the shelter now. It's not so bad, but it's not like home. I'm trying to be brave for Lily, but sometimes I feel really scared. For Christmas, I don't need toys or anything like that. I just want Lily to have her own bed again like she used to and a place where she doesn't have to worry. And maybe if it's not too much, I could have something too, a family that won't go away. I hope you're real, Santa. If you are, thanks for listening. Love, Jasper." West stared at the letter, reading it over and over. The words pulled at something deep inside her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't pity, but something like understanding. It reminded her of her own childhood, the little moments of warmth before everything went wrong. She carefully folded the letter and set it back on her desk. For the first time in a long time, West left her office before midnight. As she walked up to her bedroom, she kept thinking about Jasper's letter. The next morning, as the town was full of holiday cheer, West prepared for another day of work, but something felt different. She kept looking at the letter sitting on her desk. By the afternoon, she had made up her mind. West put on her wool coat and scarf. The cold air of the season bit at her skin as she stepped outside. Janine looked up in surprise when West walked toward her. "Find out where that letter came from," West said, holding up Jasper's letter. "I want to meet the boy who wrote this." Janine blinked. "Are you sure, Miss Hartfield? It's not really." "I'm sure," West interrupted, her voice firm, even though her heart was racing. "Let's make it happen." As West's car left the driveway and headed into town, she looked at the lights sparkling in the distance. For the first time in years, she wasn't sure what she was doing or why, but something about Jasper's letter made her feel like she had to do something. She felt a tiny spark of hope inside her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. The Wintridge Community Shelter was on the edge of town. It was a simple building with a few lights on it, trying to compete with the bigger Christmas displays. Inside, it was warm but busy. Volunteers were handing out food and coats, while the sounds of children laughing and crying filled the air. Jasper sat on the floor, drawing in a notebook while his sister Lily sat next to him, wearing clothes that were too big for her. "What's that you're drawing?" Lily asked softly, looking at the picture. "A castle," Jasper said, showing her. "It's where we'll live one day. You'll get your own room. See? And look, there's a swing in the backyard." Lily's eyes lit up as she traced a swing in the picture. "Do I get my own bed too?" "Of course," Jasper said with a smile, even though his heart hurt. "The biggest one you've ever seen." Lily giggled. She believed him completely. Jasper's drawings were promises, not just dreams. Across the room, the shelter's director, Mrs. Foster, a kind woman, saw West enter and look surprised. "Miss Hartfield, welcome," Mrs. Foster said. "I must admit, we weren't expecting someone like you." West held up Jasper's letter. "I read this. The boy who wrote it, Jasper. I'd like to meet him." Mrs. Foster's face softened. "Jasper's a special one, smart as a whip. He's over there with his sister." She pointed to the corner where Jasper and Lily sat. They were so busy with their own world that they didn't notice West approaching at first. "Jasper," West said, her voice a little colder than she meant it to be. "Are you Jasper?" Jasper looked up. "Yes, ma'am," he said, his voice quiet. "Who are you?" "I read your letter," West said, holding it up. Jasper's eyes grew wide. "Did Santa send you?" he asked. "Not exactly," West said. "I'm West Hartfield. I wanted to meet you." Jasper glanced at Lily, then back at West. "Are you from the shelter, or are you here to help us?" West was caught off guard by his question. "I'm not from the shelter," she said softly. "But I want to know more about you and your sister, about what you wrote." Jasper looked at Lily, then looked back at West. "Mom left a while ago," Jasper said quietly. "They said she might come back, but she hasn't." West's chest tightened. She knew the letter hinted at something sad, but hearing it from Jasper made it more real. "That must be hard," West said, her voice softer. "We're okay," Jasper said quickly. "I take care of Lily, and when she's scared, I tell her stories, like the one about the castle." West's interest grew. "The castle?" Jasper showed her his notebook again, where he had drawn a simple but beautiful castle with towers, flags, and a big yard. "This is where we'll live one day," Jasper said. "It's going to be safe and warm, and no one can ever make us leave." Lily tugged at Jasper's sleeve. "And I get my own bed," she whispered. "That's right," Jasper said with a smile. West looked at the picture, feeling something inside her stir. Jasper's dreams were simple: a bed, a safe place, a home. It made her think of her own home, cold and empty, even though it was big. "Why did you write the letter?" West asked Jasper. He hesitated, then shrugged. "I guess I thought maybe someone would listen. Someone who could make things better." Their eyes met, and for a second, West felt like Jasper could see right into her heart. His eyes weren't pleading. They were full of hope, and that made West feel uneasy. Mrs. Foster came back over then, and the moment ended. "Miss Hartfield, thank you for coming," she said. "I hope you see why Jasper's letter touched so many of us." West nodded, her mind full of thoughts. She turned back to Jasper. "I need some time to think, but I'll be back." Jasper looked at her, his face serious. "You promise?" West felt a lump in her throat. She nodded. "I promise." As West left the shelter, the cold wind bit at her, but she didn't feel it. Jasper's drawing stayed in her mind, along with the trust in his voice when he asked her to promise. For the first time in a long time, West felt something stir inside her, something she hadn't felt in years. Driving back to her house, she looked at the lights of Wintridge twinkling below. The town looked perfect, like a postcard, but tonight, it felt different. Tonight, it felt like it was asking her a question she couldn't ignore. What was she going to do next? She had just met Jasper, and the look on his face was both careful and hopeful. His words kept repeating in her head. You promise? West, who always liked to be in control, felt completely lost. The safe world she had created for herself seemed silly compared to the boy's life. She had stayed away from getting too close to people, even her own daughter Amelia. Yet here she was, unable to stop thinking that Jasper's letter was meant for her, not for Santa Claus. Inside the house, it was quiet, just like always. Wes took off her coat and walked to her office. Her heels clicked on the floor, the sound loud in the big, empty space. She poured herself a glass of wine but didn't drink it. Instead, she stared at her desk, where Jasper's letter was resting next to a drawing of his castle. She picked up the drawing and gently traced her finger over the pencil lines, amazed by the dream behind it. She could almost hear Janine's voice in her head. People love knowing the Hartfield Foundation is behind the Christmas miracles in this town. But this wasn't about getting a tax break or having a photo taken. This felt personal. Wes leaned back in her chair, her eyes falling on a picture of her family from many years ago. Her parents were standing behind her and her younger brother, Samuel, who was only 9 at that time. Wes was a teenager then, awkward and angry because she had to take care of her little brother while their parents were always busy. She hadn't thought about Samuel in years, not really. But meeting Jasper had brought back memories she didn't want to remember. The boy's determination reminded her of Samuel, how he used to draw on his sketch pad, dreaming of inventions or amazing worlds. But one day, Samuel disappeared. He was just gone. Wes had always blamed herself for not looking harder, for not making their parents do more. It was easier to forget the pain than to face it. Now, decades later, Jasper made that pain come back. But with it, she wondered, was this a chance to make up for what she couldn't do for Samuel all those years ago? The next morning, Wes made a call. She asked Janine to move her meetings for the day and drove back to the shelter. This time, she brought a small box with her. She had picked what to put inside after thinking about it all night. When she arrived, Mrs. Foster greeted her warmly. "Back so soon?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Wes smiled and nodded. "I'd like to spend some more time with Jasper and Lily, if that's okay," she said. Mrs. Foster agreed. "They'll be happy. Jasper's been talking about you nonstop since you left." Wes wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but she followed Mrs. Foster into the main area. Jasper and Lily were sitting at the same corner table as before. Lily was coloring, and Jasper was sorting through a small pile of books he had borrowed from the shelter's little library. When he saw Wes, his face lit up. "You came back," he said, jumping to his feet. "I told you I would," Wes said with a small smile. "And I brought something for you." She handed him the box, and inside was a new sketch pad, a set of colored pencils, and a small book on drawing techniques. Jasper's eyes grew wide as he carefully took out each item, as if they were made of gold. This is amazing," he whispered. "Thank you." Lily peeked into the box, her small face lighting up. "Look, now you can draw in color." Wes felt a warm feeling in her chest. "I thought you might like something more permanent than just notebook paper," she said. Jasper looked up at her, his face serious. "This is the best thing anyone's ever given me." Wes swallowed hard, her throat tight. "You're welcome," she said softly. The rest of the morning went by quickly as Jasper showed her some of his older drawings. Lily sat next to him, talking about the stories he made up to go with them. Wes asked questions and encouraged him. For the first time in years, she felt connected to someone outside her own quiet world. But even though she felt warm, Wes couldn't stop wondering, what could she really offer these children? Was she just someone who would come and go, or could she actually help them in a way that mattered? Later in the day, Mrs. Foster came over with a thoughtful look on her face. "You've made quite an impression on them," she said. "But I have to ask, what are you hoping to achieve here?" Wes paused, not sure how to answer. "I don't know yet," she admitted. I feel like I'm supposed to do something." Mrs. Foster smiled kindly. "Sometimes that's enough to start with." On her drive home, Wes thought about the day. She could still see Jasper's face when he opened the box, the way Lily laughed when Jasper explained one of his stories. For the first time in a long time, Wes felt like she had a purpose. It was fragile, but it was there. When she got home, the feeling stayed with her. She didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in years, she was willing to try. She knew that would make a difference. In the days that followed, Wes couldn't stop thinking about Jasper and Lily. She thought about their strength, their hope, and all the struggles they carried at such a young age. It was hard to forget them. Even her work, which usually took up all her time, didn't seem as important anymore. The meetings and emails felt small compared to the joy on Jasper's face when he opened the box. Wes had never spent much time thinking about feelings, but the boy's hope, no matter what had happened to him, touched her deeply. That night, she read Jasper's letter again. Each time she folded the letter away, she thought about her own childhood and her brother Samuel. Maybe this was a chance to make a better choice. By the end of the week, Wes decided to visit the shelter again. This time, she wanted to spend more time with the children and figure out what they needed, maybe even find a way she could help. She was scared. What if she wasn't enough? What if she only made things harder for them? But something inside her told her to keep going. When she arrived, the shelter was quieter than before. Mrs. Foster greeted her with a smile and led her to the back room, where Jasper and Lily were sitting at a table covered in paper, glue, and glitter. They were making Christmas cards, their hands covered in color. Lily was the first to see West. She smiled and waved. "Hi, Ms. West," she called out. West waved back. "Hello, Lily. What are you two working on?" Lily proudly held up a glittery piece of paper. "Cards for Santa," she said. Jasper looked up when he saw West, his face lighting up. "You're back," he said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "I told you I would," West said with a smile. "What about you, Jasper? Are you writing to Santa again?" Jasper shook his head, looking thoughtful. "No, this one's well, it's for someone else." Wes was curious. "Who?" she asked. Jasper hesitated for a moment, then slid the card toward her. On the front, there was a simple drawing of a castle. Inside, the word said, "Thank you for giving me hope. Love, Jasper." Wes felt her breath catch in her throat. "This is for me?" she asked softly. Jasper nodded, his cheeks turning pink. "You're the first person who ever really listened," he said. "It's nice to know someone cares." Wes couldn't find the words. She stared at the card, feeling a weight in her chest from his gratitude. "Thank you," she said quietly. Just then, Lily pulled on Wes' sleeve. "Are you going to help us make cards now?" she asked, her eyes full of hope. West hesitated. Making cards didn't feel like something she usually did, but when she saw Lily's eager face and Jasper's steady gaze, she felt herself pull out a chair. "I suppose I could try," she said. The next hour flew by in a blur of scissors, glue, and laughter. Wes was not very good at crafting, but Lily giggled every time Wes got glitter in the wrong place or accidentally tore the paper. Jasper, always patient, gave tips on how to make the castle towers straighter or the stars brighter. For the first time in a long time, Wes felt light and happy. She wasn't thinking about work or her long list of things to do. She was just there, enjoying the moment with two kids who had already been through a lot. When they finished, Mrs. Foster brought over a tray with hot cocoa and cookies. The three of them sat together, sipping from mismatched mugs and looking at the cards they made. Wes looked at the cards on the table. Each one showed how creative and strong Jasper and Lily were. She felt proud of them. "You're both very talented," she said, her voice warm. "I think Santa will love these." Lily smiled and swung her legs under the table. "Do you think he'll write back?" "I think he just might," Wes said with a smile. Jasper looked at her seriously. "Do you believe in Santa, Ms. West?" Wes was surprised by the question. She thought for a moment and then said, "I believe in the spirit of Christmas. I believe in kindness, hope, and in people like you, Jasper." Jasper seemed happy with her answer. That's a good thing to believe in, he said, smiling a little. As the afternoon went on, Wes didn't want to leave. Being with Jasper and Lily felt natural, like she had found a part of herself she didn't know was missing. But soon, it was time to say goodbye. Lily hugged her tightly, her small arms around Wes' waist. Are you coming back? Lily asked, her voice muffled against Wes' coat. Wes crouched down to meet her eyes. I'll be back soon, and maybe we can make more cards together. Lily nodded, her smile bright. Okay, I can't wait. Jasper walked her to the door, his steps slow and careful. Thank you for coming, he said quietly. It means a lot to both of us. Wes put a hand on his shoulder. It means a lot to me too, Jasper. I'll see you soon. That night, as she drove home, Wes felt something she hadn't felt in years, clarity. She didn't know what her role in Jasper and Lily's lives would be, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to turn away. For the first time in a long time, Wes felt a sense of purpose, connection, and maybe even hope. The cold winter air brushed against her cheeks as she stepped out of her car in front of the shelter. This was the fourth time she had been there that week. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the snowy streets. With every visit, this once unfamiliar place was beginning to feel important to her, like it was pulling her in. She carried a small gift, a set of classic children's books she had bought after hearing Jasper say how much he loved to read. It wasn't much, but Wes had started to see that small, thoughtful gestures were just as important as big ones. For years, her contributions had been impersonal, large checks signed with little thought. But now, each visit to Jasper and Lily was breaking down the walls she had built around herself, making her think about what it truly meant to give. Inside the shelter, things were busy. Volunteers set up folding tables and hung Christmas decorations for the annual holiday party. The smell of hot chocolate and cookies filled the air, mixed with the sounds of happy chatter and the jingling of bells from the children's activities. Wes spotted Jasper and Lily at a table near the back. Lily was arranging small pine cones into a wreath, her tongue sticking out as she focused. Jasper sat next to her, reading a book, his brow furrowed as he concentrated. The sight warmed Wes' heart. Lily noticed her first. Ms. West, she called out, running to hug Wes' legs. Jasper looked up and smiled, his smile calm but kind. Hi, he said, setting the book down. Hi, Lily. Hi, Jasper, Wes said with a smile. She handed Lily the gift bag, which Lily opened carefully. Inside, there were books like the Chronicles of Narnia and The Secret Garden. These are amazing, Jasper said softly, his fingers touching the books. Thank you. You're welcome, Wes replied. I thought you might like them. Lily flipped through one of the books. Jasper can read them to me, she said. He's really good at stories. Wes smiled. I believe that. The holiday party continued around them, with volunteers handing out treats and children playing games. It was so lively and warm, a big change from the silence Wes usually felt at home. At one point, Mrs. Foster came by with a mug of cocoa for Wes. I have to say, Miss Hartfield, Mrs. Foster said with a smile, you've been spending a lot of time here. The kids adore you. I've been enjoying it, Wes said, feeling a little surprised to say it out loud. It's nice to be part of something. Mrs. Foster nodded. You've made a difference for them, especially for Jasper. He doesn't trust easily, but he's opened up to you. Wes glanced at Jasper, who was helping Lily balance a candy cane on her nose. He was laughing softly, and it made Wes feel a mix of pride and protectiveness. What's going to happen to them? Wes asked quietly. Mrs. Foster's smile faded. They're in a tough situation. We've been trying to find their mother, but so far no luck. And with how the system works, it's hard to say. Wes felt her heart tighten. What if no one steps in? Mrs. Foster hesitated, looking at Wes carefully. Then they'll go into foster care, hopefully together. But there are no guarantees. The words hung in the air, heavy and sad. Wes looked at Jasper and Lily, still laughing, unaware of the uncertain future ahead. The thought of them being separated or losing their happiness was unbearable. Later, as the party started winding down and families began to leave, Jasper came over to Wes. "Are you leaving now?" he asked. "Soon," Wes replied. "But I'll see you again." Jasper looked at her carefully. Do you think people get second chances? Like if someone made a mistake, can they fix it?" The question surprised Wes. She wanted to ask what made him think of it, but instead, she nodded slowly. I think everyone deserves a second chance. Sometimes it just takes a little courage." Jasper thought for a moment, then gave her a small smile. "That's what I thought," he said before turning to check on Lily. As Wes drove home, she thought about Jasper's question. She thought about her own life, the mistakes she'd made and the chances she had missed. Maybe Jasper was right. Maybe it wasn't too late to make things right. When she pulled into her driveway, the first snowflakes of the evening began to fall, making everything glow softly. For the first time in years, Wes felt something stir inside her, a faint but strong feeling of hope. Maybe she wasn't just giving Jasper and Lily a chance. Maybe they were giving her one, two. The next week, as Christmas got closer, the town was busy with last-minute shoppers and carolers singing in the cold. Wes moved through the crowds, holding a list in her gloved hand. Each item was a small gesture. A scarf for Lily, a winter jacket for Jasper, books and art supplies for both of them. But as she did her errands, she felt something more inside her. She was becoming sure that she wanted to be more involved in their lives. Wes had spent her whole career solving big problems. But this, taking care of Jasper and Lily, felt like the hardest decision yet. Could she really take on the responsibility? Would she be enough for them? The question stayed with her, but she couldn't ignore the pull at her heart. It was stronger than her doubts. The next time she visited the shelter, it wasn't planned. She stopped by on a quiet evening, the sun setting in the sky, painting everything with gold and purple. Inside, things were quieter than usual. Some children were playing in a corner, and a few adults were talking near the kitchen. Mrs. Foster told her that Jasper and Lily were in the reading nook. When Wes found them, Jasper was reading aloud from a book, his voice calm and steady. Lily leaned against him, her thumb in her mouth, listening carefully. The scene made Wes stop in her tracks. It was such a simple moment, but it was full of love. When Jasper saw her, he closed the book and smiled. "Hi, Ms. West. You came back." "Of course," she said, smiling softly. "I always do." Lily ran over to hug her. "We missed you," she said. "I missed you too," Wes replied, bending down to look at Lily. "How about we spend some time together tonight? Would you like that?" Lily nodded, and even Jasper smiled more. They spent the evening playing games and talking about their favorite Christmas traditions. Or, for Jasper and Lily, the traditions they dreamed of having. One day, as the hours passed, Wes felt more connected to the children. Her need to protect them grew stronger. Later, as the children got ready for bed, Wes stayed near Mrs. Foster's office. The older woman motioned for her to come inside. "You've taken quite a shine to them," Mrs. Foster said gently, her sharp eyes watching Wes closely. "I have," Wes admitted, folding her arms across her chest. "I can't explain it, but they feel like family." Mrs. Foster nodded, her face softening. "That doesn't surprise me. You've been good for them. They trust you." Wes paused, then took a deep breath. "What would it take for me to take care of them permanently, I mean?" Mrs. Foster leaned back in her chair and thought for a moment. "It's not an easy process," she said. "There's paperwork, home visits, assessments, and you need to be sure this is what you want. It's not just about giving them money. It's about being there for them every day." "I understand," Wes said, her voice a little shaky. "But I want to try. I think I could give them the home they deserve." Mrs. Foster smiled faintly. "Then I'll help you get started." The drive home was quiet. Wes's usual worries faded, replaced by a strong feeling of determination. She thought about the path ahead, the challenges, the changes, and the fears she would have to face. But she also thought about Jasper and Lily, the joy they had brought into her life. For the first time in years, she felt like she was moving towards something important. The next morning, Wes called Amelia. Their relationship had been difficult for years, and there was a big distance between them, both physically and emotionally. But if she was going to bring Jasper and Lily into her life, she knew she had to try to fix things with Amelia too. Amelia answered after a few rings, sounding polite but a little distant. "Mom, this is unexpected." "I know," Wes said, her voice nervous. "I wanted to talk. It's been too long." There was a pause. Then Amelia sighed. "It has." "What's on your mind?" Wes took a breath and began telling her about Jasper and Lily. She explained their situation, how strong and brave they were, and how they had slowly become a part of her life. She read Jasper's as she spoke how much she wanted Amelia to understand, to see why this was so important to her. When she finished, Amelia was quiet for a long time. "You sound different," she said finally. "Like you found something you care about." "I think I have," Wes said quietly. "But I don't want to do this without you. I know I haven't been the mother you needed, Amelia, and I'm sorry for that. But I want to try to be better, for you and for them." Amelia's voice softened. "I'll think about it, and I'd like to meet them." Wes felt a light hope in her chest. It wasn't a perfect fix, but it was a start. In the days that followed, Wes worked hard to become a guardian for Jasper and Lily. She filled out forms, prepared her home, and learned what it would take to give the children the stability they needed. It wasn't easy. Sometimes she doubted herself and wondered if she was strong enough. But every time she saw Jasper's quiet strength or Lily's bright smile, she found the courage to keep going. One evening, as Wes tucked Lily into bed at the shelter, the little girl looked up at her and asked, "Are we going to live with you?" Wes felt a tightness in her throat. "I hope so, Lily," she said. "I'm doing everything I can to make it happen." Lily smiled and closed her eyes. "I want that too." As Wes watched her sleep, a quiet certainty filled her heart. This wasn't just about giving Jasper and Lily a home. It was about finding one for herself too. For the first time in years, Wes felt like she truly belonged. Snow fell gently outside the shelter, covering Wintridge in a soft, sparkling blanket. Wes walked through the doors with a tray of cookies and hot cocoa. It had been her idea to bring a small treat for the children and staff. She hardly recognized herself in this moment. The Wes from a few months ago would have thought it was unnecessary, but now it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Inside, the shelter was filled with a quiet buzz of excitement. Christmas was just a few days away, and the children were getting more excited every day. Mrs. Foster greeted Wes warmly and took the tray from her. "They'll love this," she said. "It's been a while since we've had anything homemade. I can't take credit for baking them," Wes said with a small smile. "But I thought it might make their day a little brighter." "It will," Mrs. Foster said. "They're in the art room. Go on in." Wes made her way down the familiar hallway to the art room. She could hear laughter and soft chatter through the open door. Inside, Jasper and Lily were sitting at a long table with a few other children. Their heads were bent over sheets of paper and jars of paint. Jasper was drawing a winter scene with a castle on a hill. Lily was spreading glitter glue across her page with excitement. Wes stood at the door for a moment, watching them. There was something about their focus, their quiet determination to create beauty despite everything they had been through, that humbled her. She stepped inside, and Lily looked up, her face lighting up. "Ms. West," Lily called happily. Jasper looked over and gave her a small smile. "Hi," he said. "Hi, you too," Wes replied, pulling out a chair to join them. "What are you working on?" Lily held up her glitter-covered paper proudly. "It's a Christmas tree. See the star on top." "It's beautiful," Wes said, marveling at Lily's enthusiasm. "And Jasper, is that another castle?" Jasper nodded, his attention back on his drawing. Yeah, it's what I picture when I think about home. A place where it's always warm and everyone belongs. Wes's heart ached a little. She touched the edge of his paper gently. That's a wonderful dream, she said softly. And I think you're closer to it than you read Jasper's. Jasper paused, looking up at her with an unreadable expression. Do you think so? He asked. I do, Wes said, her voice steady. Sometimes dreams start small, but with the right people, they can become something real. Jasper studied her for a moment, then nodded. A faint smile tugged at his lips, and he went back to his work. The afternoon passed with Wes, helping the children with their projects and listening to their stories. Lily insisted on painting Wes' nails with glitter polish. It left her hands a mess, but Wes didn't mind. The laughter they shared was a gift, a reminder of the joy she had been missing for so long. Later, when the children had gone outside to play, Wes stayed behind to help Mrs. Foster clean up the art room. They worked in comfortable silence for a while before Mrs. Foster spoke. You've come a long way, Wes, she said, her tone thoughtful. I don't think I've ever seen the kids so attached to someone. Wes smiled faintly as she wiped glitter off the table. I've become attached to them too, more than I ever expected. Mrs. Foster set down the jar she was holding and looked at Wes. You're doing a good thing, you know, but it's not just about them. It's about you too. I see it every time you're here. They've brought something out in you that you probably thought you'd lost. Wes hesitated before nodding slowly. They reminded me of what's important. For so long, I thought success meant shutting out the world, focusing only on work. But now, I see how empty that was. Being with them, seeing their hope, it's changed everything. Mrs. Foster smiled. That's the power of connection. It's messy and unpredictable, but it's worth it. The next few days were filled with preparation and excitement. Wes spent hours wrapping gifts, decorating her home, and completing the final steps of the guardianship process. She had never felt so unsure and determined at the same time. On Christmas Eve, Wes returned to the shelter for the holiday dinner. The children were dressed in their best clothes, their eyes shining with excitement as they gathered around the tree. Wes brought a bag full of presents, each one carefully labeled for the children she had come to know. When it was time for the gift exchange, Jasper and Lily were among the last to get their presents. Wes handed Lily a box wrapped in shimmering gold paper. The little girl eagerly tore it open to find a soft pink quilt and a matching set of pajamas. Lily hugged the quilt tightly, her face glowing with happiness. For Jasper, Wes had chosen a leather-bound journal with his initials engraved on the cover, along with a set of high-chew Jasperty pencils. When he opened it, his eyes widened and he looked up at her, speechless. I thought you could use something special for your stories and drawings, Wes said gently. Jasper's voice was soft but steady. It's perfect. Thank you. The evening ended with carols and hot cocoa. The room was filled with warmth and laughter. As Wes got ready to leave, Jasper approached her, holding the journal close. Ms. West, he said, his voice serious. Is it true? Are we going to live with you? Wes knelt down so they were eye to eye. Yes, she said, her voice trembling. If that's what you want, then yes. Jasper didn't hesitate. He threw his arms around her, holding on tightly. It's what we want, he whispered. West hugged him back, tears in her eyes. In that moment, she knew that no matter how hard the journey ahead might be, it was one she was ready to take. This was her second chance, and she wasn't going to waste it. Christmas morning came crisp and bright, the snow from the night before sparkling in the early sunlight. For the first time in years, West's home felt Jasper. The tree in the living room glowed with soft white lights, its branches heavy with ornaments she had carefully picked out. The smell of pine mixed with the warm scent of cinnamon rolls baking in the oven. A recipe Janine had sent her with a note. You're doing something amazing. This will make it feel like home. Lily was the first to wake up. Her small feet padded softly across the wooden floors. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs, her eyes wide as she saw the tree, the stockings hanging by the fireplace, and the pile of presents waiting to be opened. It was everything she had dreamed Christmas would be. "Ms. West," she called out, her voice echoing through the house. "Finn, wake up. Santa came." West walked out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Just then, Finn appeared at the top of the stairs, his hair messy from sleep, but his eyes bright when he saw the scene below. He slowly walked down the stairs, Lily rushing ahead to check the presents. "You didn't have to do all this," Jasper said softly, his eyes shifting to West. "I wanted to," West replied. "This is your home now, and it's Christmas. It should be special." Lily was already opening her first gift, a box of art supplies with paints, brushes, and glitter pens. She squealed with joy and immediately began planning what she would make. Jasper picked up a small package with his name on it. He opened it to find a set of books West had chosen. Stories about young heroes finding their way in the world. "These are amazing," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "Thank you." As the morning went on, laughter and conversation filled the room. West marveled at how natural it all felt, sharing this special day with people she cared about. For so long, she had avoided anything that required emotional investment. But now, surrounded by Jasper and Lily, West had spent a long time believing that being alone was the best choice. But later, as they all sat around the dining table eating breakfast, Lily looked up and said, "This is the best Christmas ever." She said it so surely. Jasper nodded and smiled his rare but real smile. "Yeah, it is." West felt something in her throat, like she might cry. She had worked so hard to make a life filled with things, but it didn't bring her the joy she felt now. Seeing the kids so happy, she re-Jaspers this. Having them here and making a home for them was what she had been missing all along. After breakfast, they put on their warm clothes and went outside. The snow in the yard was so clean, and no one had stepped on it except for birds and squirrels. Lily quickly started gathering snow to make a snowman. She asked Wes to help her roll the snow into big balls to make the bottom part. Jasper, who loved to plan things, drew a quick picture in the snow to help them build. They worked together for hours, laughing and joking around. They didn't just make one snowman. They made a whole snow family. West even made a snow dog with Lily's help. Her gloves got wet, and her face hurt from smiling so much. "This one's you," Lily said, pointing at a little snowman with a scarf and a crooked smile. "Because you make everything better." West's heart felt warm. She crouched down to brush the snow off Lily's cheek and said, "You make everything better too." She looked at Jasper, and he was standing quietly a little farther away, watching them. She noticed him and held out her hand. He hesitated for a moment, but then stepped closer. She gave him a gentle hug. The hug felt nice, and it stayed with her for the rest of the day. When the sun went down and the snow was covered in long shadows, they went back inside. Their faces were red from the cold, but they were all so happy. They sat on the couch, drank hot cocoa, and watched Christmas movies. Lily fell asleep first, resting her head on West's shoulder. Jasper stayed awake, staring at the TV, but West thought his mind was somewhere else. After the movie ended, Jasper spoke quietly. "Do you think it's okay to stop wishing for something once you have it?" he asked. West looked at him, her heart feeling soft for him. "I think it's okay to enjoy what you have," she said gently. "But it's also okay to keep dreaming. Dreams don't have to stop." Jasper thought about her words for a moment and then nodded slowly. "I never thought I'd have this," Jasper said in a soft voice. "A home. A real Christmas." Wes smiled at him. "You deserve it," she said. "Both of you do. And I'm so happy I get to share it with you." Jasper gave her a look that made her heart feel full. It was like trust, maybe even the beginning of a bond they hadn't had before. "Thank you," he whispered. That night, when Wes tucked the kids into bed, she felt peaceful. Her life, which used to be lonely and focused on work, had changed because of Jasper and Lily. They had reminded her what it meant to love and hope. She didn't know what the future would bring, but she was ready to face it with Jasper and Lily by her side. Later, standing by her bedroom window, Wes looked out at the snowy landscape. For the first time in a long time, she didn't see just a successful businesswoman in the glass. She saw someone who had found what truly mattered. She thought about her brother, Samuel, who she had lost, and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Samuel. I hope you found your peace too." The days after Christmas were a mix of happiness and getting used to new routines. Wes worked hard to create new schedules for Jasper and Lily. Their new life was exciting, but they also needed some rules. Every morning, there were the sounds of breakfast, dishes clattering, juice spilling, and Lily talking nonstop about her plans for the day. Jasper was quieter, but there was a calmness in him now, as if he was starting to feel less weighed down. Wes smiled when she saw how much their home had changed. What was once a quiet house now felt full of life. But there was still something inside her telling her she needed to know more about the kids' past and her own past too. One day, while the children played in the living room, Wes sat in her study looking at old photo albums. She hadn't looked at them in years, but now, with Jasper and Lily in her life, she felt like it was time. She turned the pages and saw pictures of her childhood, her parents, and especially her younger brother, Samuel. One photo caught her eye, a picture of Samuel at the park, holding a kite. He was as old as Jasper, and his face showed how proud he was. Wes remembered that day so clearly. She had promised him she would take a picture, so they could remember it forever. Looking at the photo made her sad. She had failed to protect Samuel and keep their family together, and the guilt had stayed with her. But now, with Jasper and Lily, she felt a tiny bit of hope. Maybe she couldn't change the past, but she could make the future better for them and for herself. The next day, Wes decided to take Jasper and Lily to the town library. It was a cold morning, and snow still covered the streets from the night before. Lily skipped ahead, excited about the snow, while Jasper walked beside Wes, deep in thought. Wes asked, "Do you like books?" Jasper nodded. "I like stories. Ones with adventures and happy endings." Wes smiled. "Those are my favorite too." At the library, Lily went straight to the children's section, where there was a story time. Jasper wandered to the shelf full of books. Wes followed him, curious to see what he picked. Jasper pulled out a book about explorers and said, "I like learning about people who went to places no one else had been. It's kind of like starting over." Wes' heart ached a little, hearing him say that. She looked at him and said softly, "That's a brave thing to do. Starting over." Jasper shrugged, but there was a bit of pride in his face. "Sometimes you don't have a choice. You just have to keep going." They spent the rest of the morning exploring the town, and Wes took them to her favorite cafe. Lily ate a big cupcake, and Jasper quietly drank his hot chocolate. Wes noticed how much more relaxed they both seemed, the walls they had built around themselves starting to fall down little by little. Later that night, as they sat together in the living room, Jasper was sketching in his new journal when he suddenly asked, "Ms. West, can I ask you something?" His voice was calm but a little nervous. "Of course," Wes said. "Do you think my mom will ever come back?" The question was heavy. Wes thought carefully before answering. "I don't know, Jasper," she said honestly, "but I do know that she loves you and Lily very much. And no matter what happens, you will always have a home here." Jasper nodded slowly. "I don't remember her very well anymore," he said quietly. "Sometimes, I think maybe she forgot about us." Wes' chest felt tight. She reached out and placed her hand on his. "I don't think she forgot about you, Jasper. And it's okay to miss her, but it's also okay to be happy here. You don't have to feel guilty about that." Jasper looked up at her, his eyes full of thanks and a little uncertainty. "Thank you," he said softly. Later, as Wes tucked Lily into bed, Lily whispered sleepily, "You're like our mom now." Wes' heart stopped for a moment, but she gently brushed Lily's hair back. "I'm here for you," she whispered. "Always." When she closed Lily's door, she found Jasper standing in the hallway. He didn't say anything, but his eyes spoke everything. He hugged her quickly, but it felt strong and full of trust. For the first time, Wes felt like he was starting to trust her completely. In her own room, Wes sat by the window, looking out at the snow. She thought about how much had changed in such a short time, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel scared. She felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. That night, she dreamed of Samuel again. He smiled just like in the old picture, standing beside a castle that looked like the ones Jasper loved to draw. "You're doing the right thing, West," Samuel's voice echoed in her dream. "Keep going." When she woke up the next morning, the dream stayed with her, giving her a quiet sense of strength. She didn't know what the future would bring, but one thing was clear. She wasn't alone anymore. And neither were Jasper and Lily. Snow kept falling softly as the new year approached, covering the town in white. The house that once felt cold and empty was now full of life. Lily was laughing as she ran around the kitchen with their new rescue dog. Jasper worked quietly on his sketches, and the sounds of breakfast plates, mugs, and happy chatter filled every room. That morning, while Wes flipped pancakes, Lily talked about her latest artwork. Jasper sat at the table, his journal open in front of him. "What are you working on, Jasper?" West asked. "Just a story," he said, not looking up. "It's about starting over." Lily, with syrup on her fingers, leaned over to peek at his work. "Is it about us?" she asked, her eyes wide. "Kind of," Jasper said, blushing. "But it's also about family and finding home." Wes' heart swelled. She sat beside him. "I'd love to read it one day when you're ready to share it." Jasper smiled. "It's not finished yet." Just then the doorbell rang, and Wes went to answer it. To her surprise, it was Amelia, her daughter. Amelia wanted to meet Jasper and Lily. Inside, Jasper and Lily looked up as Amelia came in. West introduced them. Lily's eyes grew wide. "You're her kid?" she asked in amazement. Amelia smiled. "I am," she said. "And I've heard a lot about you." Jasper, still a little unsure, asked, "Are you staying for breakfast?" "If that's okay," Amelia replied. Wes smiled. "It's more than okay. I'll get another plate." As they ate breakfast together, Amelia listened to Jasper talk about his drawings and to Lily talk about her painting. Amelia even joined in a lively debate about which holiday movie was the best. Wes watched them all and felt thankful as Amelia connected with the kids who had become so important to her. After breakfast, they went outside to play in the snow. Lily pulled Amelia into a snowball fight. Jasper stayed closer to West, helping her build a snow fort. "Do you think Amelia likes us?" Jasper asked softly. West paused and then said, "I think she more than likes you. I think she's proud of you, just like I am." Jasper smiled, and for a moment, he looked like the happy boy he was meant to be. "I'm glad she came," he said. When they went back inside, the sun was setting, and the sky was filled with long shadows. Amelia helped Lily hang up her wet mittens while Wes made hot cocoa. They sat in the living room, the fire crackling in the background. Amelia looked at West and said, "You've done something amazing here, Mom. I can see how much they mean to you." West looked at Amelia, her eyes full of tears. "They've given me as much as I've given them," she said. "Maybe even more." Amelia smiled. "I think Samuel would have been proud of you, too." Instead of feeling sad, West felt peace. For the first time, she truly believed that she had honored Samuel's memory. She hadn't just remembered him. She had created something beautiful in his absence. That night, after Amelia went back to her hotel and Lily fell asleep, Jasper came into the living room holding his journal. He wanted West to read the story he had been working on. West opened the journal and read the story. It was about two siblings who had lost their way, but found themselves again through the kindness of a stranger. The last line said, "In the end, they learned that home wasn't a place, but the people who stayed by your side, no matter what." When West looked up, tears filled her eyes. "Do you like it?" Jasper asked nervously. I love it, Wes said, her voice shaking. It's beautiful. Just like you. Jasper smiled, and for the first time, Wes saw the walls around him start to fall. He hugged her tightly, and she held him close. Her heart was full. As the year ended, Wes thought about how much her life had changed. She had started the season alone, but now she was part of a family, a real, imperfect, wonderful family. And for the first time in years, she felt complete. As the clock struck midnight on New Year's Eve, Wes stood at the window, watching the snow fall gently. She thought about Samuel, Amelia, and the journey that had brought her to this point. She whispered quietly into the stillness, "Thank you." It wasn't just a thank you for the past or for the people she had lost. It was for the future she had found. One filled with love, hope, and a family she had never expected, but always needed. If this story resonated with you or sparked new thoughts, I'd love to hear your perspective. Please share your insights in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe to stay connected and never miss our upcoming videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.